We're always told there are only two options on the table. Either we live in a universe that's just one big chaotic accident, or we subscribe to a faith that's treated like some kind of mystical secret. But what if that's a false choice? What if the truth isn't buried in mystery, but it's hiding in plain sight, just waiting for a rigorous system audit? And that question, right there, changes everything. It reframes the entire debate. We're shifting our whole approach, moving away from treating faith as a blind assumption and instead treating it as a conclusion, one that you can actually arrive at through verification. We're talking about nothing less than a full source code audit of reality itself. Okay, so let's get into the audit. And to do this right, we have to start by rigorously and fairly examining the case for indifference. What's the actual evidence that suggests the universe is fundamentally cold, uncaring, and, well, random? So the first big point is just the scale of it all. I mean, we are living on a tiny, tiny speck of dust in a cosmos with trillions of galaxies. When you're faced with that kind of mind-bending vastness, the logic seems pretty simple. How could some supreme being possibly be concerned with our brief, microscopic lives? On the surface, it just feels absurd. And then you've got the laws of physics. Gravity doesn't care if you're a good person, it pulls on you just the same. Thermodynamics works the same way in every corner of the universe. These laws are predictable, they're mechanical, and they show zero favoritism. So when things like prayers for rain seem to go unanswered, it lines up perfectly with what you'd expect from a system that's just running on cold, indifferent forces. And this line really just sums up the feeling, doesn't it? It captures that emotional weight of the argument, that feeling of a profound cosmic loneliness, like you're calling out into a void that just isn't listening. The last piece of the puzzle for this argument is randomness. You see, disasters, accidents, they happen without any clear moral logic. And this leads to a pretty compelling psychological explanation that maybe our desire for a caring God isn't evidence that one exists, but that it's just a coping mechanism we invented to feel a little safer in what is fundamentally an impersonal universe. Okay, so that's the case for indifference. And you have to admit, it's a strong case. It feels logical. But now we're going to make a pivot. We're not going to bring in some new secret evidence. Instead, we're going to look at the exact same data, the scale, the laws, the apparent randomness, but we're going to apply an entirely new analytical lens. And here's where it gets really interesting. The first key term for this new lens is Ayah. In this framework, things like the sunrise, the water cycle, the laws of physics, they're not just random events anymore. They become data points. They're systemic signatures like fingerprints left all over the place that all point back to an architect. So if the universe is filled with these data points, these ayat, how are we supposed to process them? Well, that's where Fitra comes in. The best way to think about it is as our pre-installed logic. It's like the analytical hardware we're all born with, specifically calibrated to recognize patterns, coherence, and order within this massive system. And this, right here, puts it all side by side. With a lens of indifference, all that data we talked about just looks like randomness, no purpose, an uncaring void. But when you apply the systemic lens, that same data resolves into something completely different. What looked like randomness is now seen as profound order, baqadr, meaning everything in due measure. What looked like an uncaring void now reveals itself as a coherent, intentional system. It's the same reality, just a radically different conclusion. Okay, that's the theory. But how does this systemic lens actually work in practice? How do we start filtering the real signal from all that noise? To get a handle on it, let's use an analogy that I think we can all understand from our modern world. Think of the entire universe as this massive raw data feed. It's just pouring information at you. A lot of it, like suffering or those random events, looks like noise. It obscures the signal. The Quranic framework in this analogy acts as the metadata. It's the key that provides the context, the logic to decode everything. And when you apply that metadata to the raw data, suddenly the noise gets filtered out, and what's left is a clear, coherent message. This is a purposeful system. And this quote perfectly captures the final output of that whole process. When you actually apply this analytical framework, the metadata, to the raw data of the universe, the conclusion isn't aimlessness. It's the exact opposite, a powerful, certain recognition that none of this could possibly have been created without purpose. But listen, this isn't just some abstract cosmic theory. It has profound practical implications for us right now. Because if we conclude that the universe is a coherent system, that immediately brings up a huge question. What is our role inside of it? So here's the crucial point. The Quran actually agrees with that argument from scale we started with. It says, yes, absolutely, the creation of the heavens and earth is certainly greater than the creation of mankind. But then it pivots. The greatness of the system doesn't prove your insignificance. It proves the unbelievable intellect and power of the engineer who designed it. This is what defines our role. This vast universe isn't here to make us feel small. It's the necessary laboratory for us to do our job, to fulfill our function as its trustee or Khalifa. We have been tasked to use our intellect, our aql, to understand, operate, and competently manage our part of this incredible system. And this even reframes how we think about what we call sin. In this systemic model, an error or a sin isn't just a moral slip-up. It's a systemic inefficiency. It's a failure to manage the trust you've been given with competence. At its very core, it's a kind of intellectual dishonesty. It's ignoring the overwhelming evidence that points to a purposeful design. So, after all that, where does this system audit leave us? After examining all the evidence, after applying this new framework, and after defining our role within the system, we arrive at a final conclusion. And it's one that directly challenges a very, very old idea about what faith is supposed to be. The result of this entire process, of this audit, is not some blind jump into the dark. It is not about shutting your eyes and just hoping for the best. That is not what the evidence, when you really look at it, demands from you. No. Instead, it is a step of certainty. It's a confident, rational, evidence-based step forward, one that's based on a rigorous analysis of all the available data. It's a conclusion you reach through verification, not a guess you make in the absence of it. And so, that brings us to the final question, and the decision is yours. The data is out there. The analytical framework has been laid out. The invitation here isn't to blindly believe. The invitation is to run the audit for yourself, to verify the system, and then to decide if you will assume your designated role as its trustee.